At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce the moderator of today's debate, Tom Minnery. Mr. Minnery is the president and CEO of Citizen Wing, which is a public policy partner focused on the family based in Colorado Springs. Mr. Minnery also served as senior vice president for government and public policy for Focus on the Family from 1988 to 2013. He's a steady voice articulating the conservative Christian viewpoint on family, marriage, and religious civil liberties issues. He's been featured on many national media programs and print outlets such as CNN, Fox News, major network news programs, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. Prior to coming to Focus on the Family and Citizen Wing, he was the senior editor at Christianity Today magazine. He is married and the father of 3 grown children, and also has 5 grandchildren. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Mr. Tom.
Thanks for coming today, and we will be starting momentarily. I just have a few ground rules, and we'll get through those just as quick as we can. Jim Minnery, Kim Minnery, Tom Minnery. This is not a family business, I assure you. We are, Jim and I are second cousins. Our grandfathers were brothers. All right. We will have opening statements by each candidate of 2 minutes each, and we have a timekeeper down in front. His name is Esther. Esther, just for now, will you stand up so everybody can see who Esther is there? And she will be holding up a 15-second sign and then an end sign. When the end is near, you guys know what to do. All right. And follow-on questions when we turn to another topic also will be 2 minutes in length for each candidate's opening response. But we're also going to try something here. We're going to try to relax the rules just a little bit because I'm sure I'll have a follow-up question or a clarification question, and we'll try to make it a little bit relaxed for your benefit so that there can be some freer flow of information. But if somebody runs away with an answer, then we will reimpose the Esther rule, and we'll go back to the hard finishes. All right. Now, I want to acknowledge the campaign trackers from the Mark Begich campaign who are undoubtedly here, secretly taping everything in hopes so that they can find one or more of our candidates in an untoward moment or some kind of a statement that they might be able to use in the campaign for Senator Begich later on. However, as a reminder to the audience, good manners at all times. Be kind and be courteous, because you may find your own voice on a pro-Mark Begich campaign ad if you are not careful. If you do make an outburst like that, we will secretly think maybe you are one of those Mark Begich victims. All right. We'll go 90 minutes at 1:30, and I'll be wrapping things up at that time, and we will close out with 2-minute closing statements and the opening order and the order for the follow-up questions and the order for the closing statements have been selected at random by the candidates just a few moments ago. And so without further ado, we will begin, except I should say, this event is sponsored by Alaska Family Action and its 501c3 counterpart, the Alaska Family Council. If you care about that work, and you should, because it is a pro-family voice that is steady, permanent, professionally run, here for everyone in Alaska, then you should support Alaska Family Action or Alaska Family Council. The Alaska Family Action is the lobbying arm, Alaska Family Council, the educational 501c3 arm. Envelopes for supporting the organizations are at the back table. So for the opening statements, we have the order. Mead Treadwell, you're first.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tom. Mike, it's nice to see you. Although I'm old, it's nice to be back in the sanctuary. Thank you for bringing me here before. Two of my children, Natalie and Will, are here today. And I just want to say to all of you, I come from a loving family. We love each other. We love our freedom. And as a family, we've weathered challenges to save and to protect life. My mom got pregnant in college. Abortion was available then, but I stand in front of you today because Mom and Dad chose life. And I thank God every day that you did. When I was a teenager, Dad died in a fire. And he was a public servant. And that fire came 24 hours after he had cut the ribbon at a substation of the Sandy Hook Fire Department. And those same firemen came to help save him and my brother from our burning home. For the life of me now, I cannot figure out why we would spend one dime of taxpayer money to take away life when we have too few dollars to support new fire trucks, EMTs, search and rescue. And I believe life is the civil rights issue of our time. As your Lieutenant Governor, I fought to make sure we limit government expenditures on abortion. We worked hard on limiting government payment for abortion to the time of medical necessity. As a citizen, I worked with this organization to pass a law on parental notification after our Supreme Court extinguished any parental say when a minor child decides on an abortion. I've worked hard at the state level, and I will work at the federal level to oppose and repeal Obamacare. And one of the reasons why I'm so certain we must do that is because I oppose the rationing at the end of life that may come with it. I've been through that situation as my wife Carol fought brain cancer. And I fought for religious freedom as your Lieutenant Governor, and we'll have a chance to talk today about our progress and future challenges. I'm running for the Senate because our government spends too much, borrows too much, taxes too much, meddles too much, snoops too much, and it forgets its main job is to protect your freedom, not to take it away. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank you, Tom, for coming all the way up here to Alaska to help us with this event. Community Church, also coming to Community Church, thank you for opening their sanctuary to us. And thank you all for coming. I know it's a busy day to start the week. I've got kind of a varied background. I grew up in a family. My dad was a pastor in a Christian church. Big family, 7 kids. I now, of course, adopted kind of the following my parents. I have 8 children. We still have 4 at home. My wife would have loved to have been here with me today. She's taking care of kids up in Fairbanks. But I learned my values from my dad and mom. They grew up with good heartland values. Their perspective was that God's all-knowing, He's all-powerful, and He's in control of our destinies. And that's really what guides and directs my life. It also informs me on the life issue. I think that fundamentally, where we're at today with the nation, 56 million dead, we'll probably get a little more opportunity to talk about this later this afternoon. But it reflects a government that's willing to take away life from the most defenseless. If government's able to do that, what else will it do? Your imagination is the breadth of the scope of what that government may do. And so this is a touchstone issue for us that we have to fight for. Now, for 30 of the last 34 years, Republicans have controlled the House, the Senate, and the presidency. Where are we at today on the abortion issue? Abortion is still legal. Why is it still legal? Because of Republican justices. This election is important because we cannot elect somebody this election that is simply going to sit back and be a go-along, get-along Republican. You've got to elect somebody that has a record of reform, standing up to the establishment and saying, we aren't going to take this. We aren't going to allow government to be the master and us the servants. We have to be the master over government, and we have to advocate for those issues that are important to us, that value life, that value family, that value where we're at as a nation. If you want to help us restore Alaska, restore liberty to America, I ask you to join with our campaign, listen carefully to the answers that the candidates give today, and join with the candidate that you believe is really going to fight for what you value and hold dear. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Tom. Thanks for being here. I stand here as a blessed man. I've had the honor of serving my fellow Alaskans, my fellow Americans, most of my life as your Attorney General, DNR Commissioner, as an Assistant Secretary of State under President Bush, and as a U.S. Marine Infantry Recon Officer, still serving as a Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves. But I am mostly blessed, number one blessed, because of that amazing woman sitting right there, my wife Julie, in the front row. We will be celebrating our 20th wedding anniversary 2 days from now in Fairbanks, where we were married. Unfortunately, no romantic dinner or romantic getaway. I'm going to be debating these two guys again. Oh well. And we are blessed, Julie and I, because we have 3 amazing teenage daughters. We have been blessed with our incredible daughters, and what we've done, like all of you, is tried to raise them, believe in God, believe in country, patriotism, love of Alaska, taking care of the least fortunate. And I'm standing here right now because I want to make sure my girls and your kids and your grandkids have a future that's better than the one we've inherited. And that's not happening. We all know it because the country's been fundamentally going in the wrong direction for a whole host of reasons. And we're going to talk about some of those: sanctity of life, religious liberty, but other areas that I think are very important social issues: strong families, jobs, taking care of people who have problems with domestic violence. The best way we advance these issues, the best way as a state and country, is to make sure Mark Begich is a one-term senator and the Republicans take back the U.S. Senate, which can happen in this election. And I believe I'm the candidate who has the record, the fighting will, the organization to do that. Don't take my word for it, though. The Democrats also believe it. You may have seen now $4 million of attack ads against me by Harry Reid, Mark Begich, and the most liberal Democrats in the country. Just Friday, they took out another $500,000 of ads. Trust me, Sullivans have turned off the TV. We're not going to be watching them. But I need your support, because we can take this seat, we can take the Senate back, and I would be welcome and honored. I'd be honored by your support in this election. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for honoring Esther and the time limits. Let me ask another question, and this will be one of those 2-minute answer deals. Getting near the end, you are all strong candidates, serious men, running for election in what may well be an historic result in November. One of you gentlemen will be the Republican Party nominee in a couple of weeks. Very well will be the U.S. Senator from Alaska come November. So you have partisans, each of you, in this room. And the primary day, one camp is going to be very, very ecstatic. 2 camps are going to be very, very unhappy. And I don't know, but I suspect maybe you guys are beginning to shoot at each other a little bit, or if you haven't, you probably will be. How do you, the winner, and answer this question from the standpoint of you winning the nomination, how do you pull together the party after a fractious primary season comes to an end, so the party can be unified as it faces the incumbent in the November general election? So this would be, again, by a lot. Mead goes first.
Thanks. I had a chance to speak with both of my opponents before this campaign began, and I didn't necessarily think they all had to run, but they did. And I would just tell you this: I said this to you, Dan. I'm going to pray for you. Pray for your safety. Pray for your family. I've said the same thing to Joe. And we are having a good primary. I don't want it to be a demolition derby. I believe that we should try to focus on the truth. And that's what I tried to do in this campaign. But I know that we're up against Mark Begich in the fall. And I know that when we go up against Mark Begich in the fall, we need to make sure that all Republicans come out and support the nominee. And I also know that it's important that we send a nominee forward who's got great experience in Alaska, who's got experience working with our fishing communities and our coastal communities and our art communities and our aviators, and has worked here to make things happen. And if I'm the nominee, I think it will bring lots of that to this. If I'm not the nominee, I will try to bring those constituencies to help the other Republicans. because I have had that experience in our state, within 40 years of our state, after Exxon Valdez, bringing environmentalists and oil companies together to make sure that we prevented spills, bringing people together in the Arctic, where we have the future of our economy on the one hand, and people who desperately depend on the food that is found in the ocean, the food that is found on the shore, and we've worked on safe shipping on the other hand to make sure that we bring that together. My background is bringing Alaskans together to make the right things happen. And even on the issue that we talked about, that I just talked about on parental notification, that's one where a majority of Alaskans came out to say, we're going to stand up for parental rights. And I believe we can do that. I'll work as hard as I can.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. It's a great question, and I think it's been asked. When I'm asked about distinguishing myself from the other candidates, I talk typically about three things: doer, fighter, uniter. Okay? One of the things that I'm proud of, having served in not only Alaska but for my country, is a record of actually seeing challenges that we have for the state or the country, putting together strategies and executing these relentlessly, not going to conferences, not putting out press releases, but executing things that help Alaskans, help our middle class. And this has been in big areas, in terms of the economy, in terms of the jobs, in terms of Cook Inlet, in terms of Point Thompson. These things all matter. They're social issues as well as economic issues, because when we are doing better as a state with jobs and there's hope, we have less of these problems in terms of social issues. I'm also very proud of the role I played in spearheading our Choose Respect strategy. Saw a big problem that we have in Alaska. Way too high domestic violence rates. Put together a strategy with the governor, executed it. Real results, not just talk. But also we need a fighter in Washington, D.C. We don't have that. We don't have that in Mark Begich. We have a rubber stamp. And I've been the one candidate who's been in the arena the last 4.5 years, almost from the get-go, with this Obama administration's overreach, fighting back every way. Obamacare, the EPA, the Interior shutting down our Arctic resources. We need a fighter, and I have a strong record of doing that. But we also need a uniter. And since I started my campaign, I've been very focused on bringing people together. Conservatives, veterans, Alaska Natives. That's how we beat Mark Begich. That's how we beat Mark Begich. And that's why the Democrats fear my campaign. So we need to come together, and if I'm the primary winner, I certainly plan on doing that. But this is much better than any individual. We all need to come together, take this seat back, take our country back, take the Senate back, and that's the difference between me and the other candidates. Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's talk about unity. The elephant in the room is this: the majority of voters in this state are not registered with the Democrat or Republican Party. That's a fact. In fact, that number is growing broader. At least the people I talk on the street. There's a lot of disgust over where both parties have gone. A lot of that comes out of this state, but a lot of it goes out of that fear that I gave earlier about the 30 of the last 34 years where Republicans have controlled the House, the Senate, and or the presidency. And yet this country is continuing to go down the drain. And Senator Cruz put investments and a whole lot of compromise brought us $17 trillion in debt. That was a Republican issue. I mean, the Bush administration grew the debt faster than any previous administration. Where was the first stimulus, the TARP? Where did it come out of? The Republican administration. The fact is that the people of the nation, the people of the state, don't believe that either party properly represents them. A majority of Republicans do not believe the Republican Party properly represents them. A majority of Democrats, it's the same. Where are we at as a nation? We're in a nation where the ruling class basically tells you what to think, tells you what to do, in some places tells you what to eat and drink. That is not how our country was founded. If we just go ahead and elect or nominate and go along and get along Republican, I can assure you we're going to lose this general election. You've got to have a contrast with the Democratic Obama socialist regime. You have to. You can't send somebody from Washington that says, I'm just going to go along with leadership. Amnesty is a good example of that. Okay? 300 people at the debate East St. Andrews High School. You weren't there, but we asked a question: how many Republicans here are for amnesty? One hand was raised, and yet the leadership of the Republican Party tells you you've got to have it. This is something we can't do. We need to unify around somebody that has a demonstrated record of reform. I've been challenging the establishment since I got engaged in Alaskan politics, clear back to 2004 when I stood up to BECO. The fact of it is, if you don't elect a fighter, you're going to have somebody that just gets sucked into the system, and you will not have any change. And that affects everything, not just constitutional liberties, but it affects your land here too. Thank you.
Applause is wonderful. Political candidates love it, but it eats into their speaking time. So to the extent you can hold it down, please do so. A lot of you are asking questions on various aspects of the pro-life issue. We're going to get into that next, but I have a follow-up question for Joe, and the other two can answer if they like. Joe, you mentioned the word amnesty. How do you define amnesty?
Amnesty is a hot-button issue. A lot of people see it as an issue that if you have somebody that's here illegally, and you decide that you want to provide them the benefit of being here, in other words, a pathway to citizenship, that is a form of amnesty. It doesn't matter what kind of penalties you file on. If they're here and they haven't done it the right way, you're rewarding the breaking of the law with benefit, and that is a form of amnesty. Now, the problem that we have right now is the Republican Party packages this up in all sorts of different ways. The Chamber of Commerce, which is the major backer of amnesty, as well as others like Patricia Collins, McCain, there are a variety of players currently out there in the political field right now, and many of whom supported your candidacy. And the fact of it is that they use amnesty. They don't like calling it that. But if we have a system of laws where we say that we've got a border, you aren't supposed to go across it unless you got permission, you've got a green card, or there's some other right to come across. But when you have millions of people that come across that are induced to come here by free medical care, free education, other things that are costing the states tens of billions of dollars. The fact is, you then turn around and say, hey, we're going to give you this option to get citizenship, we're going to give you this option for a work visa, instead of taking away the inducements and causing them to go back to their countries of origin and doing it the right way. My son's a Mexican national, and he wants to do it the right way. My son-in-law is. And when we look at people that are standing in line and saying, look, you're a nation of laws, but you're going to cause me to come back and forth and spend hundreds of dollars on what I don't have, but you're rewarding those that are already here. That's a world upside down, and I really don't think that's the system that our founders intended us to live under.
Thank you, Joe. Listen, we may have to institute the extra rule here in these follow-up, but we'll try not to. Mead or Dan, any response on the amnesty issue? And how would you define amnesty?
Well, I define amnesty as that means you get a free pass. I'm not for a free pass. I believe that people who are in this country illegally need to pay penalties and get in line. And some of those penalties may be so high that they're going to go home. But I've been misrepresented in Joe's bingo card that's handed out here at this event. Joe, I wish you'd tell the truth. We've talked about this several times. I will say this. We're not going to have immigration bill until we get a border that's solid. And we need a solid border. We have a crazy situation right now where tens of thousands of people are coming across our border. They're kids who ought to be with their parents. They ought to be with their parents. And we have this 2008 bill that says, no, if they're from a third country, we get to take them in. And we just had a battle to get money through Congress to build shelters for that. It could have taken the same amount of time to get rid of that loophole. I favor getting rid of that loophole. I favor moving forward on the process here, but I do not favor amnesty. In my mind, amnesty is a free pass. No one gets a free pass. You follow the law in this country, or you pay a penalty.
Thank you. Dan.
So to me, one of the biggest problems with the whole idea of amnesty goes back to what's happened, why we have this crisis on the border. The crisis on the border, in many ways, is because we have an administration that's not enforcing the laws. The laws are you deport people who come here illegally, right? And if the word is out, which it is, that we're not going to do that as a country, well, you're seeing the result. And to me, one of the things that we have to do with regard to this is make sure we're enforcing the laws. one of the biggest problems with this administration, one of the biggest reasons it's a problem is because the Democrats in the Senate encourage it, rubber stamp it like Mark Begich, is we have an administration that flouts the rule of law, that undermines the Constitution. And again, I have a record of actually going after this administration as your Attorney General to stop that, whether it was on Obamacare. You know, we didn't win that whole case, but we won on the 10th Amendment argument. That's going to be huge. We breathed life back into one of the most important amendments in the U.S. Constitution. We had a recent case that went all the way to the Supreme Court, a case that I originally brought as your Attorney General, suing the EPA over what we thought was their regulations that had no basis in the law. Lawlessness. We won. Mike Garrity finished it up in the U.S. Supreme Court. The Wall Street Journal called that a constitutional tutorial for Obama. That's what we need in the U.S. Senate. Someone who will make sure that this administration's flouting of the rule of law, undermining the Constitution, ignoring it, the president's supposed to faithfully execute the laws, not rewrite them, is taken up in the U.S. Senate. And that hasn't happened yet. It hasn't happened because Harry Reid's a rubber stamp for Obama, and Mark Begich is a rubber stamp for both of them. That's why we need to change it.
Thank you.
I don't have a word to say on that. I mean, the reason we put out that bingo card is because it's sourced. So anybody who wants to read the sources can go to it. They can listen to what you said at the debate by simply going to our YouTube channel because we have it up. It's for the people to decide. Don't believe what's said in the bingo card. Go to the sources. Find it yourself. I mean, when you've got somebody that's supporting Lisa Murkowski, who's a major amnesty backer of the Senate, and that, I mean, you think she's good for Alaska. You have even contributed to her 2016 campaign. How can you stand here and say that amnesty in your mind is a major issue that we ought to stand against?
He took 30 seconds for that accusation. Likewise.
Joe, you are not the litmus test of a conservative in this state, and you never have been. I'm just saying that. Okay? The point is this, is that many people looked at your record, looked at Lisa Murkowski's record, and made a choice. I made a choice. And I know many social conservatives who voted for her. But be that as it may, I do not support the position of amnesty, and I told you that when I used the term pathway to citizenship. That to me means pay a penalty and stand in line. That's the pathway. That is not amnesty, and I wish you would not continue to misrepresent my record.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to a pro-life issue. The Supreme Court issued a very, very important decision in June called Hobby Lobby. It's actually a Hobby Lobby and Conestoga Wood Specialties, two companies privately owned by highly devout Christian families. The Green family owns Hobby Lobby, the Hahn family owns Conestoga Wood Specialties. The issue was not contraception, as the media always tells us. The issue was abortion. The FDA has approved 20 drugs for contraceptive use. The Hahn family and the Green family have no problem with 16 of those drugs. 4 of them, they believe, as do many scientists, that those drugs actually do their work by causing early abortions. The 2 families said not those 4 drugs. The Supreme Court, 5-4, said religious liberty, free exercise of religion, applies to closely held companies, and these companies can make that decision. In response, the Democrats in the Senate proposed one of the worst abortion bills we have ever seen since the days of Roe v. Wade, something called the Women's Health Protection Act. And I'd like to have you gentlemen comment on that, or as much as you know about the Democrats' response to Hobby Lobby and the Women's Health Protection Act. And by order and agreement, we want to go in this order. This will be one of those 2-minute questions. Dan, Joe, and Mead. So Dan, on that question of the Democrats' response to Hobby Lobby, give us your thoughts if you have some on that.
Tom, I think it's one of the critical issues facing the country. I would oppose the act that you mentioned that is in response to the Hobby Lobby Supreme Court decision. But this issue, in my view, the religious liberty issue, should be something that unites Americans. Conservative, liberal. Remember, we were founded as a country, on the standards and principles of religious liberty. And what is one of the most remarkable things that's going on, when I talk about this country going in the wrong direction, one of the most remarkable things that's going on right now with this administration and the rubber stamp by Harry Reid and Mark Begich is that this great principle of our country has been under attack, religious liberty. Think about it. You have not only corporations like Hobby Lobby, you have some of the great religious institutions of America suing the federal government right now. This is Catholic institutions, other great religious institutions that are going after and feeling that religious liberty is so under attack that we have to resort to lawsuits against the federal government. And it shouldn't be that way. You know, what's really ironic about that case is that the Supreme Court in the Hobby Lobby case relied on a 1993 federal law, the Religious Freedom Act, which the vast majority of Republicans and Democrats voted for, that said there has to be a very, very high standard for the federal government to undermine religious liberty. So this is an issue that I will take as your U.S. Senator and will very, very much focus on, because I think it's a huge issue. It goes to the fundamental aspects of what this country was founded on. And right now, we have an administration and Senate Democrats who aren't focused on it. And as your Attorney General, I have a strong record, and your DNR Commissioner, of taking the fight to this administration. Real results.
Thank you.
Religious liberty is foundational to our country. That's what our country is essentially founded on, the First Amendment, right? We had people who came across this country fleeing religious persecution that they had in their countries of origin. So from the beginning, our nation thought that this was a pinnacle issue, and that's why it cited first the Bill of Rights. But what's going on right now in the nation today? Completely unresolved. We have a supporter that filed an amicus brief with Hobby Lobby. They are an electric or a closely held corporation. It's interesting because they face the same sort of things as the Christian company that the Hobby Lobby owners face. Should they be required to provide abortifacients to their workers? And they felt that was a violation of free exercise. Hobby Lobby was willing to close the doors rather than comply with such an unlawful mandate. In addition to that, Amy Evar, you around here anymore? Oh, back in the back. Amy's a classmate of mine from West Point. She's actually gone to the baker in Denver, Colorado that was compelled in Denver to bake a cake for a homosexual wedding that he didn't want to do. And frankly, I mean, to have a court order like that, where you can face, I think, something like a year in jail, that is something that strikes right at the heart of what it means to be an American. We sit back and we value, most of you here are here because free exercise, except for the Vegas cracker, are here because you value free exercise, right? I mean, you think, is this fundamental to you?
Yeah.
It's fundamental to my existence. And the fact is, if you've got a government that compels you to violate your conscience, that's an issue that you have to stand up against. And it's something that, again, platitudes don't work. You know, the action line doesn't work. You have to actually go out there and fight it. And what do I mean by that? I mean, you stand up and do the things that aren't necessarily popular. I mean, Ted Cruz on the Obamacare thing, the entire establishment up against him in an uproar over the fact that he filibustered on the Obamacare thing. Why? Because he felt strongly that it had all sorts of issues, of course, including the impacts of free exercise. We have to do things that are a little bit out of the box, but the one thing that we have to do is not be compromising in our effort to fight for these religious freedoms. Thank you.
Our founders did not view religion as a threat to the state. They viewed the state as a threat to religion. That's why we have the First Amendment. We have a president now who views religion as a threat to his policies. And to him, I say tough luck. And I'm thankful that the Supreme Court said tough luck, because oftentimes they don't say it enough. We have to stand up for religious freedom in this country. As your lieutenant governor, I've gone back several times. My grandmother was a Christian Science reader. The Christian Science Church has had nurses since long before there was a state of Alaska. But here in the state of Alaska, you can't call a Christian Science nurse a nurse. I think that's wrong. We have a Catholic Church, as Dan says, that is suing the country because they've been told how they have to treat their employees. This is an issue that's been cooked up by the Democrats and the bureaucrats to try to divide America, and I want to see America united. If a drug is legal and your company doesn't want to pay for it, that's what supplemental insurance is for. And there is a way to work that out. But they didn't want to work that out. They wanted to turn a benefit into a right and to try to say that that right supersedes your religious freedom right. And it doesn't. Tough luck. I will be standing for religious freedom as your senator. I'll be standing every day. I firmly believe that if we don't have religious freedom, if we don't build up churches, if we don't build up the family, then government is going to have to do everything. Government's going to have to provide your moral code. I don't trust them on that. They're going to have to tell you what to speak. I don't trust them on that. I believe that we are a moral nation because we are people who have morals and we support religion in the public sphere. And I will continue to support that.
All right, here's a question from the audience that I will answer, and it's a good question. Why do we not start debates with prayer? My fault. I was to give the opening invocation, and I got so busy with other things, I forgot. May we pause and invite the Lord's presence right now. Father in heaven, we are about serious business. We are about the task of returning righteousness to a nation that badly needs it. May your Spirit be in this place, Lord. May you comfort us as we survey the contentiousness that we see on every hand. May you elect to the Senate leaders who can begin solving problems. Father, we pray that you'll lead our president, lead our Senate and House leaders, and world leaders who are grappling with flames, turmoil, killings in so many countries. Father, we need your presence in our lives and in our country. And I pray these things in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you for that question. All right, let me just conclude on that issue of the Women's Health Protection Act, and there's a reason I'm dwelling on that. That law was called by the National Right to Life Committee the Abortion Without Limits Until Birth Act. That is the bill introduced by the Democrats in the Senate in response to Hobby Lobby. It would ensure, practically speaking, that every elective abortion would take place without ever being impeded, never being questioned, never being delayed. It would ensure that abortions could take place even after the time at which the young child in the womb feels pain. That bill, thank heavens it's not a law, it would force medical institutions to participate in abortions as doctors, nurses, even if they had a strong conscience that tells them abortion is wrong. It would presume that every existing state and federal law limiting abortion is invalid until it is proven otherwise. And there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of state-level abortion limiting laws. The reason I mention all of this is that Alaska has produced some unusual bipartisanship when this bill was voted on in the Senate. The Democrat, Mark Begich, and the Republican, Lisa Murkowski, both voted in favor of it. In fact, Senator Begich is a co-sponsor of that bill. And I just wanted you to know that, and to know how radical that bill is, and where those two incumbent senators stand on. Let's continue on that topic of abortion. And our respondents will be in this order: Joe, Mead, and Dan. And this will be one of those 2-minute questions, so the Esther rule will be in effect. All right. What federal laws would be appropriate, possible to pass, and suitable for a Republican Senate majority in the next Congress? Joe, you start, and however you want to answer that, please do.
Well, let's talk about one first. Life and Conception Act, Senator Rand Paul. That absolutely ought to be passed, ought to be signed into law. Although we all know with President Obama, that's not going to happen. In fact, any pro-life legislation, Tom, is not going to get through unless you have a 2/3 majority, which is highly unlikely unless this is a wave election, which it could be. And we're seeing some good signs of that. Brack versus Camp, a few other good, you have Sass, Nebraska. There are some real good signs that it could be. But unless we have 2/3, Obama will do everything he can. He's the most pro-abortion president in the history of this country. You mentioned Senator Murkowski, again, somebody that both my opponents supported in 2010. She is a pro-abortion senator. When Tom indicated to you, it's clear as a bell. If you see abortion as the singular issue, which I do, and neither of my opponents cited it as their top 3 issues in the Conservative Patriots Group's questionnaire, you would know that that is worth not saying Murkowski is good for Alaska. As Mr. Treadwell mentioned to Politico several months ago, she is not good for Alaska. Abortion is a blight on this land, 56 million dead. In fact, by the time this is done today, we're probably going to have several hundred abortions committed here in the United States. It's something that we have to address. We have to address it, not by platitudes. Now, what can be done? There's really only one thing that can be done, unless you have 2/3 in the House and the Senate, and that's defunding. But again, that requires courage. And there were only 23 House members back in 2012 that were willing to stand up and say no to the debt ceiling. So when we're talking about defunding, like Obamacare, defunding some of the things that the federal government does to advance abortion, the fact is you aren't going to be able to do that unless you have people that are willing to back leadership. But that's the only thing really that can be done other than the judges. Obviously we can fight with a Republican majority on the judges, and that's critically important. But as long as we continue to advance the judges that believe in this living document rather than an original construction of the Constitution, you can bet your bottom dollar there's not going to be changes there either. Thank you.
Now, I believe that electing a Republican Senate will help turn the tide, and I believe that's very important. I mentioned before a story where we got together as Alaskans on parental notification. Parental notification was, to me, very important as the father of a teenage daughter, because the school calls me when she needs to take a very simple drug. But we had a situation in Alaska where the state could take your daughter as far away as Seattle, someplace outside, give her an abortion, and you would not even ever have the chance to know. People in this room came together to make sure that we had parental notification. We need a national law that respects that kind of law reciprocally across state borders, and I would support that kind of a national law. And believe me, there are ways that we can help reduce the number of abortions in this country, and one of them is to make sure that the families have good conversations about life. And I believe that law does it. On the issue of defunding, I supported defunding Obamacare. I stood with Ted Cruz last fall when he was doing that, and people have asked, which group will you be part of in the United States Senate? I will be not part of that group that voted for cloture on the Hobby Lobby bill, and I'm disgusted with it. But I will say this, we have to defund Obamacare probably before we repeal it. I will vote to support to repeal it. It has many, many parts there that are objectionable to families. Finally, I guess I'd say I want to look very closely at where we are with the UN. Because again and again and again, and I found this in the Arctic, the Obama administration likes to use a back door to get their local social agenda. They're doing it to us right now on ocean policy in the Arctic. They're doing it with parental rights. They're doing it with small arms. And I think we, in the Senate, we can certainly stand up there. What Joe mentioned on judges, I agree with you. Thank you.
So I'm a pro-life candidate for the U.S. Senate, and it's been a strong conviction of mine, deeply held conviction of mine my entire life. As many of you know, there's nothing like being a parent, watching from the very, very beginning until what we have now, what I have now, to know what an amazing gift life is, what an amazing responsibility it is as well. And I think one of the things we need to do is make sure that that culture of life is something that is more emphasized by the government. And right now that's not happening. Because in many ways, the best way to reduce the number of abortions in this country is to make sure our children understand what these issues are. And I think in some ways that's happening. And that's good. That's positive. You see polls that are starting to indicate that these positions on pro-life are starting to be the majority views in the United States. That's huge. With regard to specific things that the Congress can do, obviously no funding, federal funding of abortion. That is an annual thing that takes place. I think we can make that more comprehensive and more clear from a statutory standpoint. But I also agree with regard to the parental notification issues. It is remarkable when you look at some of these statutes, what the government would require to have parents know about and not know about, particularly on an issue of that magnitude. And I'm proud to say when I was your Attorney General, after the original state of Alaska parental notification initiative was declared unconstitutional by the Alaska Supreme Court, that the next one, when it came up, I defended it as your Attorney General. So I think that there's a lot to do, and but the broader issue of making sure our youth understand this, in many ways, is what we need to do, and that's about families, not about government. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to be getting to Obamacare. If we have time, we will be getting to the marriage issue, and we'll be getting back into the immigration issue if we have time. I've got a number of questions on those matters. But continuing now,
Can I just correct the fact, and I think you meant to say this, Dan. Originally, we had a parental consent initiative that was turned down by the Supreme Court, taking away parental rights. The Supreme Court left a small loophole there, said we think the parental notification initiative will work. We had a Senate that was not going for it, a governor who was not going to change the organization of the Senate, and a group that I had together. There were many people in this room, and I'm looking at Dave in the front row, said, let's do an initiative. I said, I'll write the first check. I didn't do this as a prospective candidate. I did this as a parent who believed that that's what we needed to do. And I'm glad that we were able to get the second one through, and that Alaskans overwhelmingly supported that parental notification initiative. We have a Supreme Court right now that says we have to pay for abortions. They left a loophole. They said maybe you can use medical necessity as a way not to pay for abortions. It's 3 years into our administration, but we've worked very hard. We were able to get regulations through. Jim Minnery called and said, I want to have a big signing ceremony. I said, I'm going to sign this as soon as it gets to my desk. I want to save those kids. And that's what we've done. And the legislature this year came together, passed a law on medical necessity, and we're now in the courts, and we're now working to make that happen.
thank you. Thank you. Gentlemen?
Tom, how much time do we have? I don't want to take away from the other questions that people might ask.
Okay, all right, thanks. Let's continue on abortion just for one more round. As part of your candidate process, each of you returned a questionnaire from Alaska Family Action on your views on abortion. And it was interesting because each of you had a different gradation of view on your pro-life issue. And let me just run through those differences quickly, and I'll ask each of you to respond. And the order for the next round would be Mead, Dan, and Joe, and this will be a 2-minute answer. Let's see, Mead, in your questionnaire, you recognize only an exception for abortion if the life of the mother is in danger. Joe, you said we should save every life that we can. And Dan, you're pro-life with the 2 exceptions for rape and incest. So we will ask you to explain those views. Mead, you're first here.
I answered this question on your questionnaire by saying that the position I took, this question is asked by a number of organizations. There's lots of people out there trying to play gotcha, so I wanted to make sure that we were consistent. So my answer said this is the position I took in a questionnaire asked by Alaska Right to Life in 2010. In the rare circumstances that the mother and child will die if the pregnancy continues, and all other means to save the mother and child have been exhausted, example, a tubal pregnancy. Now, I believe that we should do everything we can to save the life of the mother and the child. And that's where I came from. And I will tell you that when my wife became pregnant with our firstborn son, Timothy, she was actually diagnosed first as a tubal pregnancy. We went through a very strong, prayerful issue, and I thank God that it was not a tubal pregnancy. That son was also almost lost to childbirth. He had an emergency C-section after his heart rate went down to nothing. And he's a strong, vibrant guy up there campaigning for me today. I will tell you that the issue here of supporting the mom, supporting the child is very important, and that we need to be working to do both.
Thank you.
So Tom, as I mentioned, my candidate is very, very focused on the important issues of the sanctity of life. And what we need to do in this country are look at ways, find ways to teach our children, teach the rest of society how important this issue is, and reduce the number of abortions. And I think there's many, many ways that we can do that. I did mention that there are 3 exceptions from my perspective that in very, very difficult circumstances, horrendous circumstances, in very, very rare circumstances that you mentioned. And that does not mean that I'm supportive of abortions in those situations, but because there's such horrendous situations, and support for the victim in those kind of situations of rape and incest is also very important. From my perspective, that's something that the family should be making the decision on. It's a difficult situation, very rare, difficult circumstances, and that's how I came to that.
Thank you. Joe.
I don't think we ought to be talking about exceptions. We ought to be talking about life. That's why I've answered the way I have. We save every life we can. If we want to fall into the opposition's camp and try to start carving out these things, and we go away from the solid foundation, which is what I think our country is built on, and we protect those liberties that God has given us, the foremost of which is life. Now, why are we going to punish the sons and daughters of the father's sins? And that's effectively what we do with rape and incest exception. The fact of it is that we have a number of people. Rebecca Kiesling, how many people have heard of her? Yeah. Rebecca Kiesling, just a phenomenal attorney, good-looking gal, I think she has 4 kids now. But this is the one that's a testament as to why we need to protect life. And she would have been aborted, her mom said that. I mean, she's a product of rape. One of our supporters out of Seattle, close friends of my own, my classmate Randy Soto back here, they adopted a son named Aaron, who was also a product of rape. He was a product of rape. 14-year-old girl was going to go into an abortion, and the Michelle's adopted Aaron. Aaron is now director, I think, of sales at the electric mirror company and is a proud father of 4. Now, these are real-life stories. Now, you talk to Aaron, he went public with an amicus briefing in Hobby Lobby, and he'll say, this is a real-world issue. This is me standing here, flesh and bone, productive member of society, why wouldn't you punish me and take away my right to life because of the sin of another? And that's something we got to talk broadly about. And some people want to shy away from, oh, we can't elect somebody that is going to do this. We can't have a nominee like that because he'll lose the general election. We're crying out loud. This issue is going to create severe consequences. It's already created severe consequences in this country. If you think God's just going to stand back and let this happen, and there's no consequences to this great nation, this is the barometer of we the people. Are we going to protect you as defenseless, or are we going to give platitudes? Thank you.
Joe and me, let me play devil's advocate here. Simply say, those positions are views that we all long for the day when this country supports. But those positions go way beyond what the law has allowed since Roe v. Wade. In other words, we're going to need a human life amendment to the U.S. Constitution before your views can be enacted into law. That takes 2/3 of a majority in the Senate. That's 67 Senate votes. That means about 15 Democrats, depending on the outcome of the November election, are going to have to be convinced of the views that you two gentlemen just espoused. How in the world do we get there? How do we make those views reality, given the political makeup of the Senate and the House, for that matter? Go ahead, Mead.
You know, this question asked, what are my ideals? My ideals are, as Joe said, that you save the life of the child. The ideal is that you have 2 innocent people in the case of rape. And we have to remember that. And if we don't remember that, we've got a problem in this country. So what can we do? I don't know that we're going to get to 2/3 right away, but I am going to speak for the ideal. And I will also tell you this, there are many things that we have done in this country because of this debate that has saved thousands of lives. Joe mentioned some of the people who are alive today because their parents chose to keep their child and maybe put the child up for adoption. I think we have to do more for adoption in this country, and that's very important. And some of the thorniest casework issues that come to my office as Lieutenant Governor, Lauren Lehman was here, he could say the same thing, are people dealing with the Office of Children's Services, people dealing with fathers who don't want to give up child's rights when mothers do, and all that. And it's very important that we work very sensitively to help keep the adoption option alive. That's incredibly important. I am going to tell you what my personal belief is. My personal belief is that there's an innocent child, and we should protect the life of the innocent child. And I have no illusions that abortion is going to disappear from this world, but I believe it should be reduced by society helping, by society believing that it is important to keep life there. And if it takes my entire life and other lives to get to 2/3, I'm not going to give up the fight just because it's going to take some time. We've got to stand for life.
Thank you.
You know, this is close to home for me also. One of the things I didn't mention is my daughter, Christiana, was diagnosed with trisomy 18 while in the womb, and she is the most incredible, beautiful child, 10 years old. She's the joy of my life. I wish I had a picture of her. I wish she could be here and you could see her. But these are real world issues that I think, again, demand that we not have platitudes. Now, both Lieutenant Governor Treadwell and I agree that according to the Constitution, life is protected. So, Tom, I disagree with that predicate. I think the Constitution already protects life. Right. The question is whether or not we're going to continue to tolerate judges who construe the Constitution in ways completely contrary to what our founders intended. I mean, my view of it is that when we face judges that no longer look at the Constitution as something that grants us these liberties and these foundational values like life, we impeach them. Now, we got to have 2/3 of the Senate on it to remove them. But we, I think, again, if it's a way of election, I think we have the capacity to do that. If we can start impeaching, it does send a signal, and that's certainly something that ought to be done. But finally, I think we have to take a stand in our sphere of influence that we have. Now, this is another real high contrast issue between Lieutenant Governor Treadwell and I. We've talked several times about the bingo card. One of the things you'll see on the bingo card are the two pro-life initiatives were both struck down, one by the Attorney General and one by the Lieutenant Governor during their terms in office. Now, they both use the excuse that even though, at least in Mr. Treadwell's view, the Constitution protects life, that the Supreme Court has said something differently. So therefore, following the Supreme Court, he did not allow the pro-life initiative to go forward. That's, just a difference in approach. My perspective is that if you take an oath to the Constitution and you believe that the Constitution protects life, then you let that initiative go forward. And this is not just on the initiative, but it's an issue. I'm not challenging either of these gentlemen on their issues of being personally pro-life. This is an issue, if in practice, what are you going to do to advance your values? Are you going to get along guy that supports, one of the most pro-abortion Republicans in the Senate? Are you going to support somebody that's supported by Paul Singer to the tune of over $300,000, a radical pro-homosexual advocate? For his son is a radical homosexual, he's an advocate for the homosexual cause. The reality of that is that when you send these people to the Senate, the end result is you will not have the courageous stands. People willing to talk about the impeachment of judges. People willing to talk about the impeachment of Obama. I think we're sick and tired of where this country is headed. I think we as a people understand we need to do different things. And we know it starts with us, but it also starts in the ballot box. So that's what we have to do. Elect the vote that are going to be courageous.
Thank you, gentlemen.
What's that?
Do you want to weigh in on this issue? And then Mead will go to you.
So, as I mentioned at the outset, I've been someone who's been honored to serve my state and my country. And what I've tried to do my whole career is do it with honor and integrity, both in my public life and my personal life. And as Attorney General, you have a very important issue of fidelity to the law. And unfortunately, in the situation that Joe's talking about, there was an initiative that would have made all abortions illegal in Alaska. I say that not unfortunately, but unfortunately where the state of the law is right now in terms of the way the U.S. Constitution is interpreted by the Supreme Court, is that unfortunately we have a controlling decision that makes that not legal. Is that a hard decision to make? Yeah. Did I feel I had fidelity to the law? What I was supposed to do as Attorney General? Yes. Sometimes these are difficult choices. But I've always served with honor and integrity. And in that case, it was a very difficult decision. But I think legally speaking, from where we are right now, we have a decision from the U.S. Supreme Court. I don't agree with that decision, but that's where it is right now. And as I mentioned, what I think we need to be focused on is making sure that we do all we can to reduce the number of abortions and to promote the sanctity of life, which can be both through what we're doing in the government, but also, very importantly, what we're doing with our families. The government is not the key to all of this. Families are, in so many different ways. One of the things that I've been about in my campaign is not looking for the government, particularly the federal government, to be focused on so many things in our lives. So yeah, this was a difficult decision. I'm on record for it. But my focus was on where I thought the fidelity to the law was. And I think that it was, we have a precedent right now that I think a lot of people are disturbed by. Certainly I am. But that's the position where we are in terms of the country.
Thank you, Mom. Mead?
Yeah. Joe, I'm going to challenge you, and I need your help. I can't put forward an initiative as the governor because I got to be judge on it. But you can, okay? And this bill that we turned down actually opens up something that I think is very important for all of us who are struggling to find ways to help save life. This is very important. The preamble of Alaska State Constitution says that all citizens have a natural right to life. We have a privacy clause in the Alaska Constitution that basically says abortion is legal. And then we have Roe v. Wade. A young man came to us, a heartfelt man, and proposed an initiative that, by the way it was written, it was directly against controlling law, and had it been drafted perhaps differently, we might have been able to approve it. I can tell you I kept the Attorney General up all night, Dan, that wasn't you, it was your successor, several times, trying to find people in this community who would actually support this argument. Joe didn't come forward to argue for him, he argued pro se. And I guess I'll just say this. There is yet, one thing I asked the Department of Law to do is go back and find, where has that preamble clause ever come up in the big abortion cases in our state, like Palmer Hospital? They haven't come up. It's an important piece that needs to be done. Now, this one was written wrong and it had to be turned down. And the Supreme Court backs us up unanimously. But my challenge to you, very honestly, is bring forward another initiative. Bring forward an initiative that takes that natural right to life clause and the personhood concept that both of us believe in, and find a way to legally move it forward. And if it passes muster, that initiative can move forward. But Joe, you just can't criticize people for following the law. We follow the law.
You know, we've heard that argument before. I was just following orders. The fact is, nowhere in the Alaska Constitution does the word abortion appear. It is a construct by an Alaska Supreme Court that has chosen to ignore the preamble, which was clearly the founder's intent. So the question to you is, do you take an oath to the Constitution or to the Supreme Court?
I'm ready to move on if you don't work. Let's talk about marriage.
He didn't answer my question, but then I'll move on.
All right. The issue of marriage, and I ask you gentlemen each in turn, and we'll start with Dan, Joe, and then me, and this will be a 2-minute answer format question. Help us understand where our country is headed on the issue of God's definition of marriage. We have seen federal court after federal court and state after state believing that the courts can undo what the people have voted to put in their constitutions, which is to define marriage the way everyone has always understood marriage. One man and one woman. And the attorneys now, the big-time guys from the other side, are vying to see who gets to represent the same-sex marriage side. Probably a year from now, well, let's see, we'll get the decision a year from June, so this case probably will be argued next spring. It's likely to go back to the Supreme Court. This question of what the lower federal courts have done on the marriage issue, and some people on our side think the Supreme Court is going to knock out the remaining state constitutional language, state to state, on marriage. And if the Supreme Court does that, it will be a Roe v. Wade decision on the marriage issue. And let me just be that general and ask you, gentlemen, to give us some advice or views, how you see that, and then what can be done about that. Dan, Joe, and then me.
Well, I think certainly from the perspective of what we believe here, what I believe, and I mentioned how blessed I am. I believe what I'm trying to live in my life. Marriage to an amazing woman, 48 hours, will hit 20 years, which I think is something I'm very proud of, and focusing on a lifelong commitment to each other. And we do that, we can talk about that in terms of the public policy world, but I also think it's important for people to set the example for your kids, for your community. And that's what I've tried to do in my life. You know, it's an issue, as you mentioned, Tom, that's very fluid right now. It is. Let's admit it. There was an article, Jim, on the front page of the ADN. Jim Minnery was talking about it. But the Alaska people in 1998 voted overwhelmingly to change the Constitution, which is not easy, to make marriage between one man and one woman. And I support that. And what's happening is that, yeah, there's discussions, and there's discussions around dinner tables and families. That's fine. That's what America is. What's disturbing, as you mentioned, not only the courts, but we now have a federal government where senior leaders have, quote, evolved on the issue, whether it's the president or Mark Bagich or others. And so what they're trying to do is say, just because I've changed my view, I'm not going to force it on you. That's not how the Constitution is set up. As I mentioned in the Obamacare case, and I was one of the attorney generals that brought that, we breathed life back into the 10th Amendment. What we need to do is make sure the states have this decision for them to make. Not courts, and certainly not the federal government, whose views have changed dramatically just in the last few years. That's not how the Constitution is set up. The people are supposed to be working on these issues, not being told by Congress and the President how to think on the moral issues. Thank you.
I agree, Dan. And by the way, congratulations on the 20 years. We're at 22 years of counting, and it's a challenge. Although with a beautiful woman like we have, not so much.
And very smart.
Very smart. You know, Kathleen's made for this stuff. And it just amazes me. Before I left this morning, I go to our 30 to fly up here. And it was just extraordinary to watch her. She gets up, she takes me to the airport, she goes down, she takes care of her kids. But marriage is the foundation of culture. It's our civilization. I mean, it's what government should encourage, right? It's be fruitful and multiply. And why do you think we're even talking about amnesty? Well, it's because we don't have enough people here to uphold our system. The fact of it is that big business wants cheap labor because we aren't producing it. That's part of it. Of course, it's also getting the bottom dollar down, which I disagree with. I think we need to protect our own. But on the marriage issue itself, we have an activist court, and the reason why is because of decisions like Roe v. Wade, where just out of a penumbra, that literally is what they called it, they came up with this right out of the Constitution. The idea of being the activist and saying the Constitution means something differently than what the founders intended. So when you have a court that acts like that, of course, when marriage comes around, you got federal judges out there that think, I'm going to impose my will on you. And we got to say no. And we got to be courageous enough to do the right thing about those judges. Obviously not letting them through the confirmation process, but also doing those things that the legislature is empowered to do if they violate the Constitution, its original intent. And I think we all have to work together on that to give our legislators courage to do the right thing with respect to it. Because if we don't, we're going to end up with all sorts of other decisions. How many people remember the Duck Dynasty thing? Yeah. Right, so we had somebody speak out on A&E that said, Phil Robertson, and he basically spoke his heart on the issue of marriage and homosexuality. And of course, the elites came down on him like you can't believe. He's out the door, right? Until you, the people, reacted. This is a situation where the elites and the ruling class want to tell you how to think. You need to push back. We all have to push back. Thank you.
I raise my right hand as your Lieutenant Governor and swore to uphold our Constitution. Our Constitution says marriage is between a man and a woman, and I have stood every day in support of that. I'd also like to thank and recognize Laura Einbold, who's in the legislature, who is a freshman, first-term legislator, has done so much to pay very close attention to this issue. Laura, thank you very much. The first Supreme Court decision that you mentioned, the one on DOMA, to me, I just can't understand. We have a tax situation that had unequal treatment on marriage, and instead of overruling the tax, they overruled marriage. That's nuts. It's time we overrule a lot of taxes. I guess I would say this. We have to stand up for religious freedom in this country. I consider marriage a sacrament in my church. There are other sacraments in my church, and I don't think the government should be regulating baptism either. I honestly believe that we have to be careful about what we're doing to protect religious freedom in this country, and we have to have a large national discussion on religious freedom. because this is something that people hold closely in their hearts and their faith. And it's not the government's job to tell them that their faith is wrong. The government's job is to protect their right to have their faith. Thank you.
Okay, I'm thinking we'll have time for one more round and then closing statements. Let me ask you this, and the order for these answers will be Joe, Mead, and Dan. One of the more significant duties of a U.S. Senator will be decisions whether to confirm or not federal judges, including members of the U.S. Supreme Court. What criteria will you use in deciding whether a presidential nominee to the federal court will be met with agreement by you? How will you understand your duty and how will you apply that in the nomination of federal judges?
Thanks, Tom. Well, I think that's an important question, and we've already talked about that quite a bit today. And that is, how do we approach the judiciary? Should we just go about and say that what they're doing is good, what the federal government and the federal judiciary is doing is positive? My answer to that is no, but we can see that and a whole score of different opinions that come down the track, including that on Roe v. Wade, clear back in '73, including now the, as I call it, the devolution of the federal court to the point now where they think they can interfere on an equal protection basis on states that decide that they want to protect marriage between a man and a woman. So the first thing that you've got to find out is how they actually perceive the Constitution. And they bought off on this theory that it's a living, breathing document that can be changed at the whim of those sitting on the bench. If so, you believe in the tyranny of the judiciary. That's effectively what it is. You're saying that the judges are the last stop. You have no independent responsibility to go out there and look at the Constitution and determine whether or not it says what it means. And Article 1, Section 8 is a great example of this. You've got 18 enumerated powers, and yet the federal government has expanded its powers far beyond those 18. And the reason why is we've let judges get away with it. And judges need to be held to account. They need to be held to account for their oath of office. Everybody gives an oath to the Constitution. There are things that you can understand. There are some close issues, obviously. The courts, I'm a lawyer, I've gone to law school. I was a U.S. magistrate judge, a state magistrate. But the fact of it is that you have to have independent responsibility to the oath you take. And if you believe in the Constitution, you apply it the way it's written, the way the founders intended it, and where there are questions that obviously have to be resolved by appeal, the higher courts get those resolved. But when you're interviewing judges at the Senate level, you got to get to the basics of that. Ask them what they think about the Declaration of Independence. Is this an organic document that influences your interpretation of law? Ask them about the Constitution and what they think about it and how the enumerated powers actually limit the federal government instead of allowing it to grow and expand. Ask them what they think about states' rights and people's rights, the 9th and 10th Amendments. And once you get the answers to those questions, you can pretty much tell where they're going to be at. You've got to look at the record, and that's key. Because if you just sit back and ask questions, you've got to get rhetoric, look at the record, find out where they've been, and make your decision accordingly.
Thank you.
I've had the honor of serving with Governor Sean Parnell, who has taken his view of appointing judges very seriously. And Joe, I'd like to thank your wife for serving on the Judicial Council, which has tried its best to send us good nominees. It's not always easy. It's even harder the way our Constitution is set up in Alaska, and I know that we've been trying to work on that here at home. But I seriously believe that we get good judges by picking people who believe in the goals of the founders, who believe that the Constitution is there to protect your rights, and believe that the role of government is to protect your rights, not to take them away. I think it is very good news that the 10th Amendment is gaining favor, because I had a constitutional law professor. I'm not a lawyer. I'm running against 2 lawyers. But I had a constitutional law professor in a good liberal arts education who basically said plenary power over anything with the Commerce Clause is power over everything. I disagreed with him then, got a lower grade, and I will disagree with him today. And I'm glad that the people are standing up for the 10th Amendment. I believe we also have to be very careful. Joe mentioned impeachment before. As a senator, you're a judge. You're not the person doing the impeaching. It's the House that does the impeaching. It's the Senate that judges on the bill that's brought forward by the House. But I believe there are times where their judges should be brought forward for impeachment, and we haven't done it. We also have not used the constitutional limitation that the Constitution gave us to limit what issues can come before the courts. And I think we have to be very careful about that and start using it. So I'll just say this, in terms of our duty as senators, I take the duty of appointing federal judges very seriously. They will come to my office for an interview. It doesn't matter if it's somebody from a distant section. I want to make sure that we have a common understanding of what the Constitution is all about. And if not, I will not use the excuse that I saw in the newspaper from our senators this weekend, which is that we just do advice and consent and go forward. I will vote no for judges who are activist judges.
Tom, it's a critical question, and I think when you look at our current Senator Mark Begich, he's been voting for judges who believe in the living Constitution, who don't believe in the Second Amendment, by the way. And it starts, and this is a huge responsibility for a U.S. Senator, huge, and it starts with understanding and experience. And as your Attorney General, I have had a lot of experience, but even deeper training. You know, two of my first jobs in Alaska were judicial law clerks with the highest federal courts of appeals here in Fairbanks. Judge Kleinfeld, one of the great conservative Alaskan judges on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, and as a judicial law clerk on the Alaska Supreme Court. So real training, it matters, particularly because these are really important issues. And then it's also about what you've done. You know, I'm glad to hear that Mead studied common law at Yale and agreed with the 10th Amendment view that maybe it shouldn't be read out of the Constitution. I took a different approach. I argued that with other AGs in front of the United States Supreme Court, and we won. It's about action. And it's about taking real action that has benefited Alaskans. To me, the best indication of what a senator is going to do is not what they say, not what they did in their undergraduate law school class, but what they've done for the citizens of this state. Real action. And I think that that's critical. I'll give you one other example. Looking at the Alaska Constitution, when I moved down to be the DNR commissioner, one of the first things I did, I looked at my mission statement. What am I supposed to do in this job? I looked to the Alaska Constitution, rewrote my mission statement, and you would have thought I committed some huge crime. There was hearings in the state of Alaska legislature because I rewrote my mission statement. Why did I do that? Because I wanted it to be based on the Alaska Constitution, keeping public servants focused on their limited constitutional duties. And that's what I'll do when I'm interviewing U.S. Supreme Court justices and other federal court justices. Limited government, not a living document, a focus on the text of the Constitution. And that's what I've done throughout my career and my training, and that's what I'll do as your U.S. Senator.
Thank you, Dan. We just got time for closing statements. You can roll a response into your closing statement if you like. But let me, before we do closing statements, let me thank Pastor Todd and the team here at Community Calvary Church. Is that right? Did I get that right? Yes, I did. Community Calvary Church, my apologies, for allowing us to be here in this wonderful place. And Alaska Family Action, Alaska Family Council is the organization that made this possible. It's a voice for Alaskans on pro-family issues such as those we spoke about this afternoon, and we will continue to debate. Very, very significant that they have the funds necessary to keep doing the work. And our closing statements will be in this order, 2 minutes each. Mead, 90 seconds on closing statements. Mead, Joe, and Dan. So Mead, go ahead.
If I can, just to respond very quickly, both these men actually have been my lawyers one way or the other. In fact, he defended me or represented me in a case against him. So, yes, sir. I guess all I'll say is this. I'm not a lawyer, but I've hired and fired many lawyers in my life. I also have worked to help write our Constitution, to help protect the Statehood Compact. And I'm not going to take any of this action, not words. We have moved as Alaskans to to sue the federal government and the Hickel administration. I helped write some of that. We helped move to get the statehood compact recognized in our own constitution. I came up with that idea, worked to help make that go through the legislature, and we are very interested in action, and I'm very proud to serve an administration that has kept our promise to stand up to the federal government. But I am going to say this as a closing statement. First off, thank you. And the kind of senator I'm going to be is tough, but not mean. I'm a real conservative, a real Alaskan, somebody who's been working at our state and its interests for 40 years. I'm very proud of it. I believe that many of the problems in our country are much better solved by acts of kindness rather than acts of Congress. And I'm not going down there to write a whole raft of new laws. I'm here in a church where I've heard it said, Matthew 25, Jesus Christ asked us to visit the person behind bars, to clothe the person who's naked, to feed the person who's hungry. And I just want to say to all of us, we can't totally dedicate this job to government. We have to have our own heart and our own sweat in it. And my 40 years here in Alaska has been in support of our charities here and charities around the world. So I'm just going to close by asking you for your time, your talent, your treasure, your touch, and your trust. I will try very hard to live by the Ten Commandments as I try every day. Remembering who God is, honoring my parents, not bearing false witness against my neighbor. I ask for your vote. And I also sincerely ask for your prayers for all of us here. So far, we've had an equal number of takeoffs and landings. And that's the way I want it to be.
Yeah.
God bless you all.
That closing statement went about 2.5 minutes, so gentlemen, you may do likewise. Joe, you're next.
I want to talk first about our campaign, this grassroots campaign. It's little guys and gals all across this great state that are involved because they see this country in peril. And they don't want another go-along-get-along Republican. I have a proven track record of being a reformer. Throughout my entire political career, I've challenged the establishment, and I haven't backed down. Some of you may disagree on some of my positions, but I don't think any of you can disagree that I'm a man of principle and that I'm going to do what I say. And when I tell you that I'm going to go and fight for you, you can take it to the bank, I'm going to do it. And it's not going to be for the corporate interest. It's not going to be for the political leadership that's out there cramming this big government down our throats. It's going to be for you. Because I come from the people. I'm the only non-millionaire that's running for Senate. The only one. I grew up poor. The fact of it is God's blessed us greatly. Kathleen and I have a wonderful family, 8 kids, didn't get a lot of time to talk about them. Christiana, the joy of my life at 10 years. I would love her to be sitting in this front row because I'd have a big smile on my face the entire time. But that is what I live for. I live for God and family. And we've got to create a future for them. And on that note, on that grassroots support, Chris Crockett, head of Alaska Right to Life. I'm the only endorsed candidate for Alaska Right to Life. I appreciate that endorsement. But this hits a little bit home. On Saturday, there was a great tragedy that befall both the Treadwell campaign and the Miller campaign. Rick Shields passed away. The patriarch of the family that's been very active in conservative politics in this state, and is active in 2 campaigns. I know it's been very, very difficult for that family. And Mrs. Crooked, did you have a bowl or a dish that you could hold out? When we leave here, this is a family that it's a struggle for them to get by. And they just lost their father. Instead of donating to these campaigns, of course, Dan doesn't need your money. And Mead spent it his own. And you know that my campaign functions on sweat equity. But please, don't give to our campaigns today. If you came here with a checkbook to write out to one of these candidates, give it to the Shields. Yeah. A couple minutes to find a container, but I'd like somebody to be standing in the back taking donations for the Shield family, because that's important for them. And if we each here gave $100 to them, it'd help them get through this very, very difficult time. And I'm committed to do that, so I encourage you to do the same. That this is a country that's founded on family, on the principles of the family, the integrity of the family. And we've got to ensure we have the protections necessary to continue this country as it was intended to be. But it's only going to be with your help. That's the only way it's going to be done. You got to do the right thing on August 19th. I would appreciate and be honored by your support on that day. Thank you.
come into people's homes, churches, factory floors, union halls, and you get to hear what the hopes, what the dreams, what the concerns are. And I love doing this. We're having a blast. We're having a great time in terms of grassroots. But one thing that has been concerning is that a lot of Alaskans, I think many of us, all of us, see the direction of this country going in the wrong direction. That's one of the huge reasons why I'm running. That we're going in the wrong direction on so many things. The fraying of the family. Trillions of dollars of debt on our kids' backs. So many things, many of which we talked about tonight. Religious liberty, the First Amendment under attack in the United States. And here's one of the most troubling things I've seen. Is certain, not a lot of us, but certain members of our community, of our fellow Alaskans, are starting to lose hope. They turn on the news, they see the chaos in the world, and they're starting to lose hope that we cannot turn this around. Well, I want to tell you that hopelessness is not an American virtue. It's not an American ideal. And unfortunately, we have a federal government that's starting to embed hopelessness. I would not be standing here if I didn't think we could do this. If I didn't think we can turn our country around and move it in the right direction, in the way we all want it to do. And I can tell you this, as I go around Alaska, we're starting to see changes. I think positive changes. We're starting to turn around situations in Alaska. Whether it's creating more jobs, whether it's cooking that's now taking off, whether it's recognizing that we have a problem with our own families in terms of domestic violence and sexual assault, and coming together as a community to tackle that. And I'm proud to have played a lead role in moving this state forward with many, many other stakeholders, many who are in the room, on many of these critical issues. And what I want to do is take what we have done here, what we're starting to do here, mostly policies that are very strongly family, policies that are focused on less government and more freedom, and bring that kind of can-do conservatism to Washington. Because we can do it, but this election is critical. We either start rolling back this Obama administration's agenda, which I've been fighting as your Attorney General and DNR Commissioner for over 4 years, or it's going to be more firmly embedded in American society.
Thanks, Dan.
And that's going to be a problem. I'd be honored by your vote. Thanks for your great attention and great questions, and thanks again, Tom. Thank you.
And we have a wonderful audience. One more time, please express your appreciation to these wonderful candidates.